The Nordic Arts Festival attracts thousands of visitors each May, drawn to Norway's cultural heart for 2 weeks of world-class performances. But in 2023, the festival would be remembered for something far darker than any stage drama. The rain had just stopped when Astrid Halvorsen took her final bow at Grieghallen on May 28th. The 34-year-old violinist had delivered what critics would later call the performance of her lifetime, a haunting interpretation of Sibelius's Violin concerto that left the audience of 1,200 in stunned silence before erupting into applause. She smiled, clutching her 1742 Guarneri del Gesù violin, its honey-colored wood gleaming under the stage lights. No one in that concert hall could have imagined that within 72 hours those same strings would be wrapped around her wrists in death. Detective Inspector Lars Vikström had been with the Bergen Metropolitan Police for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for the call that came at 5:47 a.m. on May 31st. A maintenance worker at Bergen, the historic Hanseatic wharf that forms the heart of Old Bergen, had discovered something in one of the medieval storage houses. The man's voice on the emergency call was barely coherent, switching between Norwegian and broken English as he tried to describe what he'd found. The crime scene was unlike anything Vikström had encountered. Astrid Halvorsen's body was positioned with deliberate care against the ancient wooden wall of the storage house, her arms extended at precise angles, her concert dress arranged to flow around her like water. The violin strings, later confirmed to be from her own Guarneri, were wound around her wrists in an intricate pattern that forensic photographer Niels Bakken would spend hours documenting, but it was her face that would haunt the investigation team. Despite the violence of her death, her expression was serene, almost peaceful, with her eyes closed as if she were merely sleeping. Dr. Ingrid Solberg, the forensic pathologist assigned to the case, noticed something peculiar during her initial examination. Solberg had synesthesia, a neurological condition that caused her to experience sounds as colors and shapes. It was usually more of a curiosity than a professional asset, but as she worked in the sterile environment of the Bergen morgue, she found herself overwhelmed by a sensation she'd never experienced before. The pattern of wounds on Astrid's body seemed to pulse with a dark purple rhythm, a visual echo of something deeply wrong. The autopsy revealed that Astrid had been drugged with a paralytic agent before her death. She had been conscious but unable to move as her killer positioned her body. The actual cause of death was exsanguination from a single precise cut to her carotid artery, a cut made with surgical precision. Time of death was estimated between 11 p.m. on May 28th and 2 a.m. on May 29th, mere hours after her triumphant performance. The investigation began with the obvious questions. Who had seen Astrid after the concert? Where had she gone? Her husband, composer Thomas Halvorsen, told police she had attended the after-party at the Hotel Norge briefly before saying she needed air and wanted to walk. This wasn't unusual. Astrid often took long walks after performances to decompress. Security footage showed her leaving the hotel at 10:15 p.m., her violin case in hand, walking toward the old town. But as Vikström and his team dug deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. Astrid's phone records showed regular calls to numbers in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Her bank accounts revealed large, irregular deposits that didn't match her performance fees. Most puzzling were her travel patterns. She had been making frequent trips to remote locations in northern Norway, always returning through different routes. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Erik Dahl, the festival's artistic director, arrived at the police station on June 3rd, visibly shaking and reeking of alcohol. He confessed to owing nearly 2 million kroner to Russian gambling syndicates and claimed Astrid had been helping him pay off the debt. But not with money, with something far more valuable. According to Dahl, Astrid had been part of an elaborate art forgery ring specializing in the works of Edvard Munch. Using her concert tours as cover, she would transport forged paintings across borders, her status as a celebrated musician placing her above suspicion. The violinist's trips to northern Norway weren't for solitude. She was meeting with master forger Dmitry Volkov, who operated from a remote cabin near Tromsø. The police raided Volkov's cabin on June 5th, finding a sophisticated forgery operation complete with period-appropriate canvases and pigments. But Volkov was gone, having fled days before Astrid's death. Among his abandoned belongings, investigators found something chilling: photographs of crime scenes from 1973, showing 3 victims positioned in poses reminiscent of Renaissance paintings. The murders had stopped when a local priest, Father Bernhard Stenson, died in what was ruled an accidental fall from Floyen Mountain. Dr. Solberg's continued analysis of Astrid's wounds revealed another disturbing detail. The pattern of the violin strings matched exactly the finger positions for a specific musical piece, Bach's Chaconne in D minor, considered one of the most emotionally intense works in the violin repertoire. Someone with intimate knowledge of classical music had staged this scene. The investigation took another turn when Natasha Petrov entered the picture. The 41-year-old Russian art dealer had been in Bergen during the festival, ostensibly to attend cultural events. But deleted text messages recovered from Astrid's phone revealed a passionate affair between the 2 women, conducted in carefully coded language that spoke of harmonies and compositions that investigators realized were references to forged paintings. Petrov initially denied any romantic involvement, but when confronted with the recovered messages, she broke down. She and Astrid had been lovers for 2 years, meeting during Astrid's tours. But Petrov swore she had nothing to do with the forgery ring. She dealt only in legitimate art. She had been trying to convince Astrid to leave the criminal life behind, to run away with her to South America where they could start fresh. The rain that Bergen is famous for had been both a curse and a blessing to the investigation. While it had washed away potential evidence from outdoor scenes, it had also forced the killer to work indoors, leaving more trace evidence than they might have otherwise. It was a single hair caught in the ancient wood of the storage house that would prove crucial. The hair belonged to neither Astrid nor any of the suspects. DNA analysis revealed it came from a female related to Astrid, her 16-year-old daughter, Maya. Maya Halvorsen was a violin prodigy in her own right, studying at the prestigious Nordland Music Conservatory in Oslo. Teachers described her as brilliant but troubled, prone to dark moods and obsessive practicing. She had been supposedly in Oslo during her mother's death, with her dormitory's security logs confirming she hadn't left the building. But a deeper dig revealed she had hacked the system, something the tech-savvy teenager had learned from online forums. When brought in for questioning on June 12th, Maya initially maintained her innocence. But faced with the physical evidence and a gentle approach from criminal psychologist Dr. Hanna Lundgren, she eventually confessed in a 3-hour session that left even veteran investigators shaken. Maya had discovered her mother's criminal activities months earlier while looking for sheet music in Astrid's study. She found correspondence about the forgeries, evidence of the affair with Natasha, and most devastatingly, records showing that her mother had used Maya's own concerts as cover for smuggling operations. The teenager felt her entire life had been a lie, her musical achievements tainted by her mother's crimes. But it was the discovery of newspaper clippings about the 1973 murders that pushed Maya over the edge. She found them hidden in a violin case in their summer cabin, along with items that had belonged to Father Stenson, including a journal detailing his artistic corrections of unworthy souls. Maya realized her mother had discovered the priest's crimes and, instead of reporting them, had kept the evidence as insurance or inspiration. On the night of May 28th, Maya had taken a train from Oslo to Bergen, arriving just as her mother's concert ended. She confronted Astrid in the storage house at Bergen, a place Astrid had shown her years ago as a secret magical spot where Vikings once stored their treasures. The confrontation turned violent when Astrid admitted everything but showed no remorse, even suggesting that Maya should join the family business. Using knowledge gained from her mother's own research into the 1973 murders, Maya had prepared the paralytic agent and staged the scene to frame Natasha Petrov. She positioned her mother's body to mirror one of Father Stenson's victims, hoping police would connect the cases and assume the art dealer was a copycat killer. The violin strings were her own touch, a final musical statement using the Chaconne, a piece about transformation through suffering. The trial that followed gripped Norway and the international classical music community. Maja Halvorsen was tried as a juvenile, with the court ultimately finding her guilty but recognizing the severe psychological trauma she had endured. She was sentenced to secure psychiatric treatment rather than prison, with the possibility of eventual release based on her rehabilitation progress. The forgery ring collapsed with Astrid's death. Dmitry Volkov was arrested in Belarus and extradited to Norway, where he provided evidence that led to the recovery of 17 forged Munch paintings from private collections worldwide. Erik Dahl received a suspended sentence for his role and left the music world entirely, now working as an accountant in Stavanger. Natasha Petrov was cleared of all charges but left Bergen immediately, her current whereabouts unknown. Thomas Halvorsen, Astrid's husband, was revealed to have been completely unaware of his wife's activities. The mild-mannered composer had been so absorbed in his work that he'd never questioned the family's improving finances or his wife's frequent absences. He moved to Denmark with his younger son, unable to bear the memories that haunted every corner of Bergen. The Guarneri violin, its strings now evidence in a murder case, was eventually donated to the Bergen Symphony Orchestra, where it remains unplayed in a climate-controlled display case. Musicians say that on quiet nights, when the concert hall is empty, you can sometimes hear a faint resonance from the instrument, as if it still remembers its final terrible performance. Detective Inspector Lars Vikström retired 2 years after the case, the weight of it having fundamentally changed his view of human nature. In his final report, he wrote, "We tell ourselves that evil announces itself, that we would recognize it when it walks among us. But evil can play Sibelius beautifully. It can create art that moves us to tears. It can love its children and still destroy them. The real horror isn't that monsters exist, it's that they look exactly like us." The storage house at Bergen, where Astrid died, has been sealed off from public access, officially for structural concerns, but locals say it's because visitors reported hearing violin music echoing from within, always the same piece, Bach's Chaconne in D minor, played with technical perfection but devoid of soul. The Nordic Arts Festival continues each May, though security has been notably increased. They no longer program Sibelius's violin concerto. The case remains a dark chapter in Bergen's history, a reminder that beneath the city's picturesque facade and cultural refinement, human darkness can flourish like moss in the perpetual rain. The blood moon that rose over Bergen on the night Astrid Halvorsen died was a celestial coincidence, astronomers insist. But for those who lived through that terrible spring, it feels like it was nature's way of warning them that some performances, once begun, can only end in tragedy.